on a second, Jonathan. Didn't you just do a BVM kit? Yes, we did. That's a good question. But we're doing another one, and this time it's for me. So we acquired this kit from Kelly in Montana. It's a early 2000s kit. Nez likes it too. I think from some of the details on the kit, it was ordered early 2000s, I believe, and it is a classic BVM kit. And some of the updated parts to make it a turbine kit were ordered 2016. So it's been around for a while, and this is going to be a fun one. So I'm building this one for myself. I like the T33. It's a cool aircraft. Not entirely sure on the scheme yet that I'm going to do, but I think I'm going to do the Red Knights, I believe, but that is up for negotiation. No, Nez. And anyways, guys, this is a bit of a long project, obviously, just like the Super Bandit we just did. Now, I'm not going to focus entirely on this one. This is just going to fit in a little bit here and there. We've got until early 2024 before I really want to have this ready for paint. Welcome to the lighter side of RC, where Princess Nez is always in view. So we're going to take our time with this, so it'll be fairly sporadic in between other projects, but I just want to plug away on this for myself over the winter here. So it's going to be a fun one. Obviously, the very first step with these BVM kits is the build portion, which is very in-depth. So what we're going to do is I'll try and keep this as in-depth as possible, and it'll be a fun one. So thanks for tuning in. Let's dive in to the BVM T33. All right, just to give you a bit of back history here. So this is some of the turbine updated stuff or upgrade stuff. And this was shipped like mid 2016. And some of the original documentation I found in here is from, I think, early 2000s. When we come across it, I'll show you guys. And we've got a bunch of pictures here from Kelly as well of Bob Violet's, I think one of his original T33s. So lots of good reference pictures here as well. So cool stuff, very cool stuff. All right, so opened up some of the envelopes here. We've got a couple sets of plans going on, or plans there. We've got a decal set or decal set here. Now this is for the USAF decals number 5815. So this is the scheme that we've got kind of laid out already, but I'm not sure if we're going to use that scheme. But we do have them as an option, so that's nice to see, and gives us some already done options. Now I'm thinking of doing this in the Red Knight scheme. Now the Red Knight scheme is a Canadian scheme. It's not very common as well, which is why I want to do it. Also, it's mostly red with a little bit of black, so it's very visible. Although I do like the silver schemes with kind of the red or orange highlights. So very undecided right now, but obviously we will have to make a decision as we get through this build. Okay, so this box here, it looks like we've got our some cockpit items in there. We've got some speed board stuff, speed brakes. That looks like a canopy there. I think so. So anyways, lots of goodies in that box. All right, so when I first brought this home, I kind of went through everything and just combined everything. So we got more plans here. We've got our tip tanks, our surfaces. Now these wings and all the surfaces are foam core balsa built up, so we're going to be fiberglassing all of these guys and then obviously painting them afterwards. There's some stuff in here that I have no idea what they're for. Here's some of the old plans, old T33 plans. Some acrylic rods, I don't know what those are for. So that's all interesting stuff. This box here kind of has all of our other parts in this box. So we've got tanks and intakes and lots of good things in here. So we got some very nostalgic parts here, some classic T33 landing gear. That's cool to see. Very nice. Very nice. And I know somewhere in here is a set of purple retracts. There they are. So we got a set of Super Bandit retracts, purple airs. These are hard to come by. So that's what we're going to be using for the landing gear, is the purple retracts. So going to be a fun project. I'm really looking forward to this one, partly because it's for myself, but I love the T33. I think it's a pretty darn cool aircraft, and this was a nice acquisition, and it's going to be a beautiful flyer. It's a lot smaller though than things by today's standards. So if you think about the T33, so we have it sitting over there on the table. It's as long as that table is, and I think that table is 6 feet long, and you look at something like the Rebel up there, it is, the Rebel's a little bit bigger than the T33 is. Now the T33 has a nice big wingspan, nice big tip tanks, but it is a small aircraft by today's standards compared to most. So at this point, the equipment's not overly important, but we're gonna be setting it up with our standard setup of equipment. Still, I'm undecided on engine choice, but I think I might be putting a Zykoi X95 in there, I think. The plane was originally designed, I think, for a P60 back in the day, and I think around 100 newtons would be a great engine for that. We're also at elevation here, also fly from grass fields, so I have to keep that in mind as well. Okay, so I'm going to spend some time getting things organized. As I mentioned, this is kind of a bit of a side project, a bit of a here and there project, if you want to call it that. So it's not going to take up the main focus of the shop, because we're going to be working on the SU-30 from Skymaster next. So we're going to dedicate this to like 1 to 2 tables here at the shop. So we're going to get everything laid out, and we'll just plug away at things slowly. All right, so we got everything kind of laid out here. Now you got to remember, we've got multiple generations of kit here. The nice thing is all of the new stuff that just came in 2016 all has this type of label, so it's fairly easy to see, like tail mount hardware. This is all the updated stuff. The old stuff with the original kit all has this type of label on it. So that's nice. It's going to make finding this stuff a lot easier. But that is basically all of our stuff laid out on the table. You can see here, like this is some of the old stuff where you've got a fan mount group, right? So obviously we're not using that, but I just laid everything out, so we had everything here. We've also got multiple generations of plans. I've put the extra plans aside, and we've got our most updated plans right here to take a look at. So we're just working through everything like we did on the Super Bandit. So we've separated everything out. I had the fuselage taped together and everything just to keep it nicely together. So our first steps here is quite simple. So we are taking out the intake openings and the hatch. Now they've molded the hatch in place like this, then there's a replacement that goes over that. So we need to get rid of this except the little recessed piece, and then we want to get rid of the intake openings as our first steps. Check, check. All right, so we got our intake sanded out here. I used a Dremel bit to get most of it, and then a small drum, and got it fairly close. I'm not going to sand those all the way down, probably until we get the intakes installed. It says in the manual not to damage or sand this surface right there. And then we've got the nose opening cut out, this piece right here, and we save this for paint stuff later. We can try paint samples on there and things. That's what they say to do in the manual. And then here's the actual replacement piece that goes in that spot and requires a little bit of sanding to fit it perfectly. So next step in the manual is an F80 portion, which we don't need, F80 only. So we're moving to the front gear mounting here. So we're just gonna follow these steps, much like the Super Bandit we just did. So getting our carbon flex arms ready to go first, and going through the steps here. I'll keep you informed as we work through this stuff. All right, so we've added the sanding point to our flex plates. We've tapped both of the middle holes for a 440 thread. And next thing we're doing is locating the molding dot on the side of the fuselage. So those are right here. They're pretty common all over this, this fuselage. This helps to locate the former work. So what I'll do in this case is I will take my plane and we'll just get rid of the little bump that's sticking out, and then we'll take our 1/16 drill bit and drill through the skin. And then what the point of doing this is you take a toothpick that's included in the kit and you install the toothpick here, same thing on the other side, and that helps locate your former. Put together the front portion here with the retract and the formers and stuff. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky because our manual is not 100% up to date. So like as an example, our manual doesn't show these formers here, and it shows still the old wood formers with like the switch piece that goes in there. And we've got some new layout items here. So as an example, I think that's where that goes, and I think this is going to be the steering servo right here. Not really sure what that's for, but anyways, we'll work with it. It's not overly important anyways, because when you look at things like the layout here with all the different systems that have been used, I mean the fuel solenoids, ECU, all that stuff is totally different now, right? So we've got servos controlling airlines and valves and stuff. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do on this, but here's another example. There's our steering servo right there, and ours now is going to be mounted, I think, right here. So just some things to be mindful of. Fortunately, we've got our toothpick to align this former and this former. We are just going to do our best. So there's just a little bit of our flex plates sticking out past the front former work. So that's kind of how we have it set up right there. And when I line these two pieces of former up on the plans, it right now is spaced properly. We use some of those big wood screws with the pan heads to hold the flex plates in on the back. So now that we've got all this stuff assembled here, it says install the F1 flex arm, retract assembly into the fuse, and slide forward until it hits the toothpicks. So the toothpicks are located right there. Now one thing that's important here is we haven't done any sanding in the fuselage. That's quite important. So what I'll do in this case is I'm going to get these guys positioned where they need to go. We're going to mark out the fuselage here, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time sanding these areas before we spot glue them in place. You got to remember to do that stuff. If you just glue to the fuselage without sanding, it will not turn out well. So that's one of the reasons I haven't installed the toothpicks yet in the fuselage, is I wanted to make sure that we had those areas sanded. All right, so another challenge that I've come across here is our formers. So we've got a couple updated formers, like this guy here, which pretty sure is a new updated one. And then of course we got all the new pieces that are in the bags here. So that is a positive. One of the downsides is some of our main former work here. So we have this guy as an example, F2. Now this is the former that goes right here. So this kind of supports the intake ducts, also supports the tanks. So this is the one that we had in the kit. This is one of the very old iterations of this. The ducts are very small. There's no fuel tank cutout here like should be on this one. So this is what we have. That's what we need. And you can see there very much what it looks like for that former. So we're gonna need to make that. All right, so spent a couple hours last night doing a whole bunch of research, doing a whole bunch of examining over all the parts that we have for this T33 kit, and I think I have some resolution. Now, I asked my beautiful wife to do me a favor yesterday. I'll show you what she did for me, and then I'll tell you about what we figured out. So there's been so many generations of this kit that there's a lot of different changes. Now we do have an older set of plans. There's probably a new set of plans, but we'll just make it work off of these ones because it's kind of fairly new. So anyways, so what I got Katie to do was I got her to blow each one of these pieces up. So all the circled pieces I figured I would need. Now we've already got things like this one, but it's missing all the holes and cutouts, which is important for our gear mounting system. So anyway, she got those all blown up for me. So as an example, here is the one that fits in the front for the pipe intakes and the fuel tanks, right? So all I did for this was I took this measurement right here, this measurement right here, got it scaled, and that's how we figured all these out. So anyways, what I told her was blow this up to be 25.5 centimeters wide, which is the width of this piece right here. So now we've got a template to be able to cut out a new version of this former, which is good. That's actually what we need. Now, I found a lot of the new stuff that we have in the orders. So initially I thought I needed like gear mounts here, but we don't. We've got those right there. We've got the outside gear mount pieces. This fits on the root of the fuselage where the wings match on, so we've got those. We've got our braces here, but we are missing a couple things, and what we are missing is this one right there and the landing gear mount brace. Now, I'll throw a picture up here. What I found on the BVM site was the new carbon former kit. So we've got I ordered a set today, so this one and these guys here, which are a new version of this. So this one I think was for the ducted fan, so this came all the way up and around, that came all the way up and around like that. There would be some reinforcers added in the newer generations, and the new generation, this one here, is basically this bottom portion is what it ends up being. So yeah, anyways, I'm pretty confident with everything we have going forward. So we've got the materials, the templates to kind of keep going, and then once we get our other pieces, we'll be able to keep going even further. So that's a positive. I think we've got everything in place right now. The only thing that I'm truly missing that we will need to fabricate is that 3-inch piece of pipe extension going from the bypass to the intakes. So not a big deal. We can print that. We can make it out of fiberglass. We do have quite a few options when it comes to that. So that is positive. So I didn't do anything more on the fuselage last night once we were doing all of our research. So I am going to add some carbon reinforcements. So where I'm going to add the carbon reinforcements, I think, is in this upper area right here, because it's quite flimsy and we don't have we're not going to be using the ductwork that comes all the way and wraps around. We're just going to have the lower ductwork. So we're going to add some carbon reinforcement in that area. I was thinking about doing it in the front gear, but it looks like they've added a lot more to the layup, and it's quite stiff in that area already. So we're going to probably leave that one as is, but just get more carbon in the layup in this area. So going to kind of plan that out first here. We still have to do our sanding in the front, but that's the next things that we're working on. All right, so we got our plan in place here. I've kind of gone through and marked out all the areas we're going to be adding carbon fiber reinforcement. So this front area here, the lower section, we're adding carbon fiber reinforcement. So just one layer of quite heavy carbon cloth. So this, I believe, is 6-ounce cloth. A little hard to show you, but in between the two Kevlar ribbons there. So this section right here, and then I'm going to do this section right here as well too. Basically, we've got the main former here goes through right here. We've got our other one for the wings there, and the new version of this I don't think comes up as high, so I think it's just this piece cut low. So anyways, that's why I'm reinforcing the cheeks, I guess we'll call them there. And what I'm doing now is just sanding out the surface with some 60 grit just to roughen everything up. All right, so we've got our carbon cut here. These are the back pieces on the side. These are the mid pieces on the side. They're almost the same size. And then we've got our big piece in the bottom there. This is coming a little bit too far onto the area for the gear doors. That's going to get cut out and replaced, but not a big deal because it's getting cut out and replaced, so that's no problem. Now I'm just thinking about this ahead of time, and because we're adding a bunch of reinforcement on the side here, I would really like to get the fuselage in the correct shape while we're waiting for this stuff to cure. First thing we're going to do once we get all this, so we're going to get all the carbon glued in place. But then what we're going to do is we're going to put the hatch cover on here, get that taped in place. But I'm just thinking, I think what we're going to do is I'm going to do up the cockpit frame, these guys here, and then we're going to use that to hold this portion in place as well. And ultimately what this is going to do is it's going to get everything kind of in the right shape. That carbon will still be bendable and flexible, but it's going to be, once we put that one layer of carbon on here, this fuselage is going to be a heck of a lot stiffer. So I just want to make sure it's in the right shape to begin with. All right, so we've got our cockpit frame made up here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of our fiberglass in. We're going to mix up some West Systems epoxy and get all of our carbon installed. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to clamp our canopy in place. And we're going to clamp that all along the joint here. And that's going to keep things nice and shaped. Now we do have this part of our canopy is kind of angled up funny. So anyways, when we clamp that down, it's going to help shape that a little bit. And then our engine hatch cover here, we're going to tape that in place all the way around. So hopefully that helps to add some good shape to the fuselage. All right, so we got everything in place. I put the canopy frame on first, did 8 clamps per side. That's nice and lined up. The hatchback here is a little bit tricky. The fuselage wants to suck in, and the tape's not holding the fuselage out, but at least we've got reverse of what we want to happen here. I'd rather have the fuselage in, and then when we put former work back here, it's pushing the fuselage out versus having it out and have to suck it in. I think it's a little bit easier to deal with. So I'm okay with that. I think it's good. We've got our carbon installed inside. And what I did was I used my epoxy that I mixed up, the West Systems, painted some on the fuselage, laid the fiberglass or carbon in there, brushed it down with my brush, and then I took a paper towel, whole bunch of paper towels, and soaked up the excess. So it's actually quite dry right now, which is perfect. So we're gonna let that sit overnight and do its thing. Well, we've got that stuff waiting to cure, so we have the opportunity to move on to the front former work and retract system here. So we've got our toothpicks installed. I've slid the whole assembly forward as the instructions say, and tack glued F1A, which is the second former back here. Or sorry, maybe that's F1. Anyways, the main one here, tacked it back in place with a little bit of CA. So now what we need to do is we need to take this former off, the front one, and we need to undo our whole retract assembly and get the flex plates reinstalled without the gear in place, which means that we need to take obviously that whole thing apart. All right, so we've got our formers tacked in place. The last thing tonight is high-soling those things in place, and we'll let that set up till tomorrow. All right, so we've got all of our reinforcements done, and we took all of our stuff that was bolted on the fuselage or clamped on the fuselage off. Next step in the manual is to cut out the nose door. So we've outlined the nose door outline with tape. We're going to use a Dremel 409 disc. The 409 discs are the very thin discs. These guys right here. So they are, if you're doing something like this is the thinnest disc to use. We could also use a razor saw, which we may use. We'll see how things go, but this is one of the tools to cut those types of openings out. So I used the 409 disc, got all of our cutouts done. Now, you know, it says to do this as one piece to begin with, so that's what we're doing. When you're using the discs, it's always wise to stay away from the corners. So tuck the corners in as much as possible, but we still have a little bit of material left in there. So now I'll use a razor saw and just finish off those corners. So we've got our door out here. First thing I did was mark which way's forward, so it's a quick reference. We used our sanding block to block sand the edges to make them straight. Next thing we're going to do is put our polyply strips on the front and rear nose door cutouts. poly plies here. It's really thin stuff, just 0.010, and get those glued in place. We're just going to use CA to glue them in place, and then we'll come back and put some epoxy over top of them when we've got some mixed up. So this is one of those things that I like to do as batch gluing sessions. So what that means is when I have like a former or something to do, if it's not critical that I get that former installed now, I will kind of add that to the list. So, you know, next time I mix up some epoxy, I'll just make sure I go back and put a little bit over top of the poly ply and fuselage areas versus mixing some up and wasting some. All right, so we've got our poly ply pieces glued in there, making sure, of course, that we sand the fuselage, sand our poly ply pieces. You can see the sanding marks there. And we use some medium CA to get those held in place. So when I glued these in, I just hold them in place. The fuselage is upside down right now, but I just hold them in place, wick a little bit of medium CA underneath there, and spray a little bit of kicker, and it's a pretty quick process. So now when we put the door on there, it is perfection. All right, so we've got our wires and hinges assembled on there. We've got our little cutouts done on the door. These little cutouts are for the hinges of the opening and closing system. So next thing to do, I've also roughened this up. Next thing to do as per the manual is to get those located on the door and tack glue them in place. So we've got the door back installed. The hinges haven't been glued on the fuselage side yet. So what we're doing here is we're getting everything nice and centered. So the hinges naturally center this side to side, but forward and backwards. We want to make sure we're centered with the same kind of gap there, which we are. So now we'll put some tape holding this door in place, and then we'll flip the fuselage back over and we'll spot glue those fuselage side hinges in place. All right, so our doors are all done. We had to do a little bit of sanding on the inside edge there because there was a little bit of interference between the joints because they were too tight. The doors operate smoothly now, and as the manual says, the air actuators will be installed later in the manual. So there's a piece of ply that gets mounted here. So this guy right here, and our door units get mounted on that ply piece right there. And the leg actually comes right up in between the two cylinders. So, but we'll put that aside for later in the manual as instructed. So this is all done. Next thing we're moving on to is the F2 former. Now the F2 former is one of the ones that we needed to redo. So you can see there the shape of the F2 former compared to the one that we have, of course, which is the ducted fan version. So we've traced this out on a piece of plywood. This guy here, I think this is, what is this? 1/8 ply, yes. So we've traced it out on a piece of plywood. I'm gonna get this cut out and we will work on getting this glued inside the fuselage. Okay, so we've made our replacement former here, just a lot of sanding and cutting. And what I've done is I've drilled out my 2 locator holes for our toothpicks in the pre-marked locations. And the manual also tells us to go 7.6 inches back from the rear of the nose door cut line. So I've marked that as well too. Before we put that former in, I'm going to come in here with my X-Acto knife and get rid of our excess carbon. When I was installing this carbon on the fuselage, there's a couple areas where it just kind of hangs down, and I left that in place to cure with epoxy. So just take a razor knife and just cut that off. It'll be fairly simple. All right, so I've put the ducts in and kind of fit everything and just test fit everything. Now these toothpick holes are actually off a little bit. So the 7.6 inches is about 3/8 of an inch back from the toothpicks. So what I've done is just compiled some pieces of wood here that we'll put in against the toothpicks, and that's going to get us in the right spot for our former gluing. So these are 3/8, ½ inch is a little bit too much, so we'll use these spacers to spot glue our former in place. And the other thing I've done here is we have installed the brace back here, the main wing spar, I guess you'd call it. Main reason for that is this pushes the fuselage out a little bit and actually brings this into the correct shape. So with that in place, it also does affect this area a little bit. So that's why I have that installed, so we can get this spaced out nicely. So we'll get this lined up. We're going to get it spot glued in place with some CA. And then what we're going to do is we're going to glue that former. We're going to glue our nose, door, hinges, and our poly-ply pieces. So that's what I'm talking about with kind of batch gluing things. All right, so we've removed the doors. That's going to allow us better access to our poly-ply strips here and also our side pieces. And so what we've done is we've mixed up some epoxy. This is West System 610, and we will get all of our stuff glued. So all the door-related stuff and the front former. Okay guys, so next thing we're moving on to is the speed board or speed brake. So a couple things we're doing here. So number one, we can't fully install the speed brake, but if we're following the manual, that's okay because we don't need to do that yet. So this is our F3 former and our air cylinder mounts. Now the F3 former kind of goes in this area. The air cylinders mount on the F3 former and operate the air brake. So it's got lots of force. So anyways, we don't have our F3 former yet. That's on order from BVM. But we do have the speedboard fairly recent update here, which has the carbon arms and stuff. So it comes with a nice little diagram here that shows us exactly what we're doing. This is actually kind of cool too, so you can see exactly what's needed here. And this is our F3 former right there. So we're essentially doing this stuff here as per the manual, but all of our updated parts are right there. So first thing we're doing here in the manual is we're going to make our cutouts on the rear of the speed board and the front of the speed board, not doing the sides yet. I think they want you to do the front and the back, then get all this stuff installed first. So that's what we're doing next is our cutouts. All right, so we've got everything assembled on the actual brake mechanism itself. That worked out good. Everything's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot that the instructions doesn't tell you. It's pretty much perfect. The only thing, because we've got old kit, new kit, is this little plywood tab. That's not a problem. We can just make that plywood tab. That's no issue at all. And then prepping out our area here, we sanded down with a Dremel against the former where the big wood piece mounts. And then we laid it in there, marked out where our carbon arms come down here. And we have ground that down as well. So you can see, obviously our air doors or speed brakes are going to be carbon lined now. So they're going to be extremely stiff, which is good. And that's part of the reason why we did that carbon in that area. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get this spot glued in place. So we're going to just use a little bit of CA to glue everything in place. Actually, we're going to probably high sol the block, I think. Use some CA to spot glue the block, and then we're just going to spot glue the hinges on there just so we can check the operation of the entire air brake system. All right, so air brakes are cut out. Those worked out very nice. Very happy with that actually. And they do have a little bit of play obviously because there's only one pivot on there, but I think once the air cylinder and stuff is installed, I think it'll be just fine. And we also have poly-ply to install on each side along with that wooden tab right there. So that worked out awesome. I was a little worried that they wouldn't match up perfectly, but when you look at the angles and everything, they look really good. All right, so we've got everything done that needs to be done on the air brake, and we're gonna let that sit and cure overnight. I've also taped the underside of the fuselage, the air brake, just to keep it closed, so like the manual suggests, there's no damage. All right guys, and that's going to wrap up video number 1 in the BVM T33 build series. We're at a bit of a standstill right now in the instruction booklet, which we are following page by page. The reason we're at a standstill is we're waiting for the upgrade parts from our BVM order. So the next part is getting the wings, I think, mounted or something like that. So I haven't really taken a good look at the manual, but I know we're at a standstill. So we accomplished tons in this video. Obviously, lots to do still, of course, but we will continue plugging away at this aircraft slowly over the winter. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions or comments, list them down below. Always fun to do one of these classic builds or assemblies or whatever you want to call it is totally fine. So a couple things. Don't forget to check out the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. We do a lot of fun things at the After Dark channel. Basically, we do live streams here on the channel every 2 weeks-ish for about 2 hours-ish, and that's done on the After Dark channel. We also have a podcast series coming up on a completely separate channel, so keep an eye open for that. And additionally, there's a channel membership available. Some links and stuff are down below if you want to check it out. Basically, the channel membership, you get access to videos early compared to the regular release date. So when I'm recording this video right now, we actually have 2 videos for the next week that are sitting in the members only queue that if you're a member, you can watch. So check those details out at the link down below. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.